Leo, a shocking truth is coming your way, and it's going to change everything. Welcome back, Radiant Leo. This isn't just another horoscope video. This is a divine moment, a message that found you exactly when you were ready for it. And trust me when I say, you didn't find this video by chance. The universe doesn't operate on coincidences. It operates on calling. I'm honored to be your guide today on Eternal Mindfulness, your spiritual home for cosmic insight and grounded empowerment. What we're about to explore is deeper than prediction. It's remembrance. A remembering of who you are, why you came here, and what truth is finally rising to the surface, no longer able to hide. Have you felt it too lately? That sense that someone is watching, that something unspoken is about to come out? Maybe it's a look you exchanged with someone that felt loaded with unspoken emotion, or maybe it's just a sense in your chest that won't go away. That, Leo, is your intuition, and it's screaming for your attention. You are not here to be small. You are not here to wait for someone to validate you. You are the fire. You are the moment. And you are about to witness someone, or something, unravel in your presence. Not because you demanded it, but because your energy no longer allows illusions to stand. Before we go further, I invite you to comment below with an angel number that's been following you lately. 111, 505, 818, maybe 144? Your number is not random. It's the signature of the frequency you're currently aligned with. When you comment, you're anchoring that vibration into your reality, and into our growing family here at Eternal Mindfulness. And if this energy already speaks to your soul, let me take just a moment to say thank you. Thank you for being here. For every like, every comment, every share, every subscription, you are part of something so much bigger than a single video. You are co-creating a space of healing, transformation, and real truth, not watered down, not sugar-coated, truth that liberates. And I promise you, Leo, this reading is not just entertainment. It's activation. You'll want to stay until the very end, because what's being revealed today is breathtaking. A soul-level shift that may begin with a glance, but will echo into your destiny. So tell me, my fierce-hearted Leos, what did you feel, or do, that called this energy in today? What did you sense, even if just for a second, that made you click this video? That feeling wasn't a fluke. That's your power awakening. And we're about to dive right into it. Let's begin. There are moments when clarity arrives not through explanation, but through presence. A glance. A pause. A shift in energy so subtle, it bypasses the mind and lands directly in the body. In the next 2 days, you may find yourself in exactly such a moment, where someone's eyes or silence says more than any carefully chosen words ever could. And it won't feel accidental. It will feel like truth rippling through the air, like the tension of a dam just before it breaks. The kind of truth that doesn't shout, but sits in the room and changes everything just by existing. This kind of awareness doesn't come from thinking. It comes from what we call insight, the quiet knowing that arises when the heart is clear and the ego is not in control. For Leo, a sign ruled by the sun, this is powerful terrain. You are the bringer of light. And when you shine, you illuminate everything, not just what's beautiful, but also what's hidden. That's what makes this moment uncomfortable for others who have been hiding something real from you. Because your clarity exposes their confusion. Your strength highlights their fear. Your openness brings contrast to their armor. And yet, this isn't a call to confront or to force anything. It's about standing still in your truth with unwavering grace. When the moon appears reversed in tarot, it speaks of illusions falling apart, secrets surfacing, and intuition leading the way out of the fog. This is the atmosphere surrounding you right now. You are not required to act. Only to see clearly. Only to honor the truth that is naturally rising. There's a teaching that says, when you no longer need to be right, the truth becomes easy to see. That is what's unfolding here. Someone you once held space for may be realizing just how much they couldn't meet your energy, and they're feeling the weight of that realization now. You may feel their emotional crack without any words spoken. You may witness them fumble, avoid, or even circle back, but it's not your responsibility to rescue them from the truth. The most compassionate thing you can do is hold your center. This is where the heart becomes both teacher and student. You begin to see how many times you've shrunk so others wouldn't feel small. How often you've dimmed your brilliance so others wouldn't feel blinded. And now, with the cosmic energies shifting, especially Mercury aligning with fire signs, communication becomes raw, honest, even if unfiltered. Don't fear what you hear or see. Fear what happens when you ignore your own knowing. In moments like these, silence becomes sacred. Because not everything needs reaction. Sometimes, the greatest act of power is choosing not to react at all. Just to witness. Just to breathe. Just to recognize that your awareness alone is the sword that cuts through the illusion. What this moment is offering you is not confrontation, but liberation. Not from others, but from the need to be accepted by those who never truly saw you. You don't need closure. You don't need confession. What you need is permission, from yourself, to stop making yourself smaller for those who refuse to grow. So if your heart already knows something your mind is struggling to admit, let this be your sign. You've seen enough. You've felt enough. And now, you get to choose you. Not out of bitterness, but out of love. The kind of love that says, I will no longer abandon myself just to be included in someone else's story. This is your reminder that power doesn't always arrive in grand gestures. Sometimes, it arrives in the simple act of not pretending anymore. Let that be your strength today. Let that be your quiet revolution. There is a quiet kind of strength that emerges when we stop trying to prove our worth and simply begin to live as though we already know it. For Leo, this isn't about arrogance or bravado, it's about alignment. When you no longer perform to be loved, but instead embody your truest self unapologetically, something profound begins to shift. You stop seeking permission. You stop shrinking. And without saying a word, your very presence becomes your message. That's the kind of transformation unfolding for you now. It doesn't come with fireworks or applause, but with a steady return to the truth of who you've always been. Astrologically, the days of May 18th to 19th mark a moment of internal expansion. The moon, in a gentle angle to your solar energy, illuminates parts of your emotional self that may have been ignored, dimmed, or overly controlled. These are the parts of you that didn't feel seen, even in the spotlight. And now, Instead of waiting for someone else to acknowledge them, the cosmos invites you to acknowledge yourself first. To bring light to the inner world, not by force, but through compassionate observation. In tarot, this inner work is mirrored by the star, a card of healing, hope, and soft regeneration. The star doesn't demand anything from you. It doesn't rush your process. It simply reminds you that even after destruction, clarity can emerge. And that what remains, after the ego has been humbled, is something purer. Something you can trust. This is the season of inner restoration, not the restoration of what you had, but the beginning of something wiser because of what you've lost. In contemplative traditions, there's a teaching that says the greatest liberation is not found in seeking more, but in releasing the illusions we once clung to. This speaks directly to the part of you that used to believe you had to be perfect, prepared, or picked in order to be worthy. What if, instead of constantly asking if you're enough, you gently allowed yourself to stop asking altogether? What if your worth wasn't something to earn, but something to remember? True healing isn't dramatic. It doesn't require big rituals or elaborate declarations. Often, it begins with a whisper, "I see you. I forgive you. I still love you." And sometimes, the person who needs to hear that the most, is you. You, Leo, with your mighty heart. You, who has carried others through their storms. You, who has often played strong so no one would have to worry. This is your time to be soft with yourself. Not because you are weak, but because you are finally safe enough to be real. There's a kind of clarity that arises when you stop editing yourself to fit someone else's narrative. You begin to rewrite your own, one where you are no longer waiting to be chosen, but instead choosing yourself over and over again. Choosing peace over performance. Choosing truth over approval. Choosing the joy of self-acceptance over the hunger for external validation. And it's in that choice, again and again, that your inner light becomes undeniable. So if something in your chest has been stirring, a realization, a release, a quiet readiness, honor it. Let it rise without judgment. Let it speak to you not in pressure, but in presence. This moment is not asking you to rush ahead. It's asking you to return home. And home is wherever you no longer have to pretend. You may feel raw. You may feel tender. But that's not a setback. That's the sign you're arriving in the truth. So breathe into it. Place your hand over your heart. Whisper what you once held back. You don't need an audience. You don't need applause. You just need to know that your honesty is enough to begin again. When we think of abundance, we often picture money, success, recognition. But in truth, abundance begins with how we value ourselves. It is not something we chase. It is something we align with. For Leo, whose essence is to lead with passion and purpose, this alignment becomes the foundation upon which all external rewards are built. In these next 2 days, there's a subtle yet powerful invitation to reevaluate where your energy is flowing and whether it's truly serving you. If a project feels lifeless, if a collaboration feels forced, or if your body is signaling burnout, it's not a failure, it's feedback. In astrology, the energetic body and the physical body are deeply linked. And right now, the planetary transits suggest it's time to check in with both. With Mercury activating reflective fire, the message is clear: you cannot keep pushing forward without recalibrating from within. Your physical exhaustion is not weakness. It is wisdom. The same way the sun must set each night to rise again, your fire too must rest in order to shine brightly. Resilience isn't just continuing, it's knowing when to pause, realign, and return with deeper clarity. When it comes to money, remember this: financial flow is rarely just about effort. It's a mirror. A reflection of your internal beliefs about worth, safety, and trust. When those beliefs are rooted in fear or scarcity, you will find that no matter how much you work, the returns feel inconsistent or unsatisfying. But when those beliefs are rooted in clarity and self-respect, you'll notice that even small actions attract surprising results. This is not magic. It's cause and effect. It's the unseen connection between your energy and your outcomes. Sometimes we stay in environments, jobs, or agreements not because they serve us, but because they feel familiar. There's a quiet fear of what might happen if we let go. But letting go isn't loss, it's space. The same way a field must be cleared before new seeds can be planted, your life needs room for what's truly aligned to take root. And if something no longer holds vitality, it's not your responsibility to revive it. Your only responsibility is to honor what feels alive inside you. Take care of your nervous system. Not just through rest, but through intentional rituals. Warm water with lemon in the morning may seem small, but it awakens your system with softness. A walk in the sun isn't just exercise, it's an invitation to reconnect with your solar essence, to absorb light in the most literal sense. And choosing to put away your phone an hour before sleep? That's not just a healthy habit, it's a sacred boundary with the external world so you can return to your internal rhythm. There's a teaching that says the wise one eats when hungry, sleeps when tired, speaks when necessary, and acts when inspired, not from force, but from presence. That's the kind of wisdom you're being asked to embody now. Your value is not in how much you do. It's in how clearly and courageously you live in alignment with what feels honest and energizing. This is not the time to prove. This is the time to listen. To choose partnerships that honor your brilliance, to say no to what drains you, and to treat your well-being not as a luxury, but as a priority. Because Leo, your energy is your currency. And when you tend to it with care and courage, abundance doesn't just visit, it stays. Sometimes, the heart remembers what the mind has long tried to forget. Love that was once overwhelming, beautiful, and all-consuming often leaves behind echoes, not just in memory, but in the way we protect ourselves, in the walls we build without even realizing. When you have loved someone so deeply that you began to blur the line between giving and self-abandonment, healing is not about forgetting them. It's about remembering yourself. You may not have realized it then, but each time you said yes when your body said no, each time you forgave too quickly, each time you waited for them to see you, you were moving further away from your own center. But there comes a moment, quiet, almost unnoticeable, when something shifts. You stop rehearsing the past in your head. You stop waiting for closure. You stop asking, why didn't they love me better, and begin asking, why did I think I wasn't worthy of more? That's not bitterness. That's awakening. And that's exactly where the energy of this moment is leading you. In astrology, when the emotional body is under activation, particularly for Leo, ruled by the heart and the sun, it's not about blaming the past, it's about illuminating what it taught you. And it taught you something priceless, that love is not measured by how much you're willing to endure, but by how much you're willing to honor your boundaries, even when you care deeply. The reverse 10 of Cups in Tarot is not a punishment. It doesn't mean that love failed. It means something was incomplete, maybe a soul contract unfulfilled, maybe a lesson not fully integrated. But it also means you are no longer in the same chapter. And if someone returns, it will not be for you to sacrifice more. It will be to show you how much you've changed. To help you recognize that your capacity to love has expanded without losing your clarity. You can still feel something for someone and no longer need them to complete you. And if they don't return, if that door stays closed, that too is a blessing. Because empty space is not emptiness. It's preparation. You're making room for something new. Not just a partner, but a connection rooted in wholeness, not healing. In stillness, not struggle. The kind of love that doesn't require you to explain your worth or dim your light. It meets you where you are and walks with you as you continue becoming. There's a simple yet powerful truth. The person who caused the wound may not be the one who brings the balm. You don't need them to validate your growth. Your growth is self-evident. It's in how you hold yourself now. It's in how you pause before reacting. It's in how you no longer confuse longing with destiny. And that quiet strength? That's you, choosing peace over patterns. Presence over proving. Self-respect over nostalgia. When you notice a part of yourself waiting, still, for someone to come back and make it right, try this instead. Place your hand on your chest and say, "Thank you. I've learned enough." There is deep power in that release. It doesn't mean you didn't love. It means the love you gave is now being rerouted back to you. Every ounce of hope, compassion, and patience you once extended to another person is now being recycled into your own becoming. And just like that, something inside you relaxes. The breath deepens. The future softens. You begin to trust again, not because someone else has changed, but because you have. Because you know now that the right person won't ask you to compromise your core in exchange for companionship. They will recognize your light not as a threat, but as a mirror. And when that moment arrives, when love returns, or arrives anew, you'll be able to receive it not from longing, but from wholeness. That's the kind of love that lasts. Not everything that guides us speaks in words. Sometimes, it's a number that repeats on a clock. Sometimes, it's a color we keep reaching for without knowing why. Sometimes, it's a phrase we whisper to ourselves when the world feels too loud. These small signals may seem random at first glance, but if you pause and lean into them, you'll realize they're subtle invitations, reminders from your own higher awareness that you're not wandering aimlessly. You're aligning. You're remembering what you've always known deep down. Energy is real, and everything around you is part of that communication. Numerology teaches that numbers are more than counting tools. They're frequencies, codes that carry specific patterns of meaning. When you see a number like 818, for example, it's not just coincidence. It's a message that something old is closing, and something new is ready to enter, if you're willing to let go. It's a call to release outdated identities and create space for a new, more authentic version of yourself to step forward. Similarly, the number 27 often appears when we're standing at a threshold. It's not a number of chaos, but of choice. It encourages conscious decision-making, the kind that can shift your trajectory entirely, not by accident, but through clear, calm commitment. And then there's 44, a number of quiet protection. You may not always see the forces working in your favor, but you can feel their presence in the moments when things somehow hold together, even when you're falling apart. This number carries the grounding message that you are being supported, not just by the people around you, but by the integrity you've cultivated within. As for 333, it often arrives during transitions, particularly when your inner world is expanding faster than your outer circumstances. It reminds you to pay attention to dreams, to conversations that feel oddly timed, to moments of déjà vu. These aren't distractions. They're glimpses into the deeper fabric of your experience. Colors, too, speak their own language. Deep indigo, the shade we often call midnight blue, anchors your energy when everything else feels unstable. It reminds you to trust your own inner royalty, even when life feels unsteady. Gold, with its radiant boldness, doesn't just attract admiration, it activates your magnetism. It reminds you that when you walk with integrity, recognition becomes effortless. And green, especially the cool, calming tone of jade or seafoam, nurtures the heart. It doesn't erase your pain, but it softens it. It whispers to your nervous system, "You are safe now. You don't need to fight anymore." In these moments of recalibration, spoken affirmation becomes more than just words. It's a practice of sovereignty. When you say, "I choose myself," you're not pushing others away, you're pulling your own energy back. When you say, "I am full," you're not closing off, you're ending the habit of looking for validation in places that cannot give it. And when you declare, "I create my reality," you're shifting from reaction to response, from helplessness to intention. You're not pretending everything is perfect. You're simply refusing to give your power away to what isn't. This practice doesn't require perfection. It asks for presence. It doesn't demand that you fix everything overnight. It simply invites you to notice what feels true and follow it with gentleness. That might mean changing your routine. It might mean wearing a color that grounds you when you're anxious. Or it might mean writing a number down and meditating on it, not because it holds magical answers, but because it helps you remember that you're not disconnected. You're part of a larger rhythm, one that becomes clearer the moment you stop trying to control it and start choosing to flow with it. If a number or a color has been speaking to you lately, don't ignore it. Comment it below, not just for engagement, but as a ritual of acknowledgement. When we witness each other's alignment, we amplify it. And this community isn't just here to entertain you, it's here to walk with you, as you become more and more yourself. If you're still here, still reading, still holding this space with me, then I know, with quiet certainty, that something deep within you has already begun to shift. And maybe it's not loud. Maybe it's just a whisper, a soft stirring that says, "I'm ready to come home to myself." Not to impress, not to prove, not to chase. Just to return. To remember. To stand where you are, exactly as you are, and see not someone waiting to be chosen, but someone already whole. Already enough. You don't need anyone's permission to start over. You don't need someone else's validation to know that you've grown. You've carried the weight of too many unfinished stories. But right now, you're standing at the beginning of a new chapter, not because the past is fixed, but because you are finally choosing not to carry it in the same way. What if, just for today, you didn't question your worth? What if you looked in the mirror and saw not the flaws or the mistakes, but the fire that's still burning behind your eyes, steady, warm, and unshakable? Maybe the exhaustion you felt isn't failure. Maybe it's sacred. Maybe it's your soul's way of saying, it's time to stop shrinking for places that can't hold your light. And what if the clarity you've been waiting for isn't something to find, but something to accept, that you were never lost in the first place? That the moment you stopped looking outside for answers was the moment the real answers started to rise from within? So here's a question I want you to sit with, really sit with it. If no one was watching, no one was judging, and nothing needed to be perfect, what would you choose for yourself today? Would you walk away from something? Would you forgive someone? Would you finally take that leap you've been putting off? Or maybe, would you just rest? Write it down somewhere. Or better yet, share it below, not just for you, but for the others in this community who need to see someone else brave enough to choose themselves. And before we go, let me say this: thank you. Thank you for showing up, not for me, but for yourself. For every moment you paused to reflect, for every breath you took a little deeper, for every shift in awareness that happened while no one else could see. You are doing the work. And you are not alone. If this message resonated with you, if it made you feel even 1 degree more whole, please take a second to like the video, subscribe to Eternal Mindfulness, and comment an angel number you've been seeing lately. Let that be your signal to the universe: I'm listening. I'm ready. I'm awake. Because from this point on, your journey isn't about being noticed. It's about walking so fully in your own light that those meant to find you will never miss you again. You don't need to chase a spotlight. You are the sun. Let the world adjust its eyes.